Hello, we're going to interrupt this podcast. We were talking about the Fulbright hearings of 1961 to 1970. This explains how the Veterans Administration was terminated, as we know, from 1920 to that date, the 1961, during the Vietnam War. Senator Fulbright wanted to end the war, so he did hearings with very important people in the Congress of the United States. But as you had seen in the last testimony from Sherman and Mr. Peabody, 1972 is a very important year. This is when the Veterans Administration fell. They turned into a socialized medicine in the United States. We do not have a socialized medicine. The only ones that have a socialized medicine are the veterans and the soldiers and sailors, Marines of the United States of America. They have socialized medicine. Even though we're in a Cold War back in those days with the socialist Chinese and the socialist communist Russia. So what I'm doing is we're changing our format in mid-range. We will go back to it in podcast number 3 when we talk about the corruption of the veterans system in America, podcast episode 3. So, without further ado, let's see what happens. Thank you. Thank you, Sherman. You and Mr. Peabody are doing a great job with your time machine. Now, the situation is Senator Harkey took over the Veterans Administration's day-to-day operation through the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. Now, I've looked it up. You don't know who they were, who was on the committee. You can't find out what committee did from 1970 to 1977. That's 7 years. You can't find any of their reports or their committee meetings on the Veterans Administration and the Veterans Affairs. So, what is going on? Did they hide it? Or did we have the government take over a system for the veterans and not tell us they took it over? But what they did was they wrote hundreds of laws. They call it the laws that govern the VA. What does that mean? Well, if you go in for a disability and you have a problem with them, you can go to your patient advocate and they go, oh, well, that's covered under the laws that govern the VA. So I sit there and go, what are they? So I had to ask my lawyer, where was that? So he gave me an address on the internet to find the laws that govern the VA. And there's hundreds of them. They have made everything. Which hand do you use your toothbrush with when you're in the VA hospital? How you conduct yourself in the VA hospital. 99% of the laws they break at will. So, these are the things that you've got to watch out for as a veteran. Now, the next thing you got to watch out for is the regional office. These people have made new systems since 1977. We'll get into those in podcasts probably 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 episodes. And like I said, there's a lot of this information that I got and I was able to put together. Now, what I did from 2004 to 2023, I worked 6 hours a day on finding information, finding out where they were lying about my case. And with a lawyer, I finally was able to get 16 service-connected disabilities. The Veterans Administration lied to judges. They put out some horrendous lies. So, without further ado, you get to see the veterans, how they handled the Veterans Administration. You'll see what they did, how they did it, and I added a new character in. His name is Dr. Schultz, and also I added in D.R.O. Schultz. Now, Schultz was in the TV show Hogan's Heroes. He saw nothing, did nothing, and he wasn't even there yesterday. So, basically, this is the VA system and the laws that govern the VA. So, thank you.
questions about the VA and a claims crisis after audio recordings that reveal employees from the Department of Veterans Affairs discussing a backlog of medical requests from vets surfaces. And the tapes suggest that those employees decided the best way to deal with the crisis was to just destroy the files. That eliminates the requests. Trace Gallagher live in Los Angeles with more. Trace?
And it's no surprise the VA hospitals are backlogged, Megan, but now this evidence showing that thousands of veterans, many of them severely wounded, went years without getting their checkups, and some did not get them at all, mostly because the hospitals are understaffed, but also because veterans' medical files were destroyed to eliminate the backlog. Now, a former Marine and VA employee who blew the whistle says the VA hospital here in Los Angeles would get 3,000 requests a month for medical exams, but they could only have the resources to process about 800. So every 6 months, they'd have about 13,000 backlogged exam requests. Turns out that wait list accounted against their efficiency levels. So he alleges the hospital would cancel older requests, destroy the files, and now the Daily Caller has obtained audio to back up that claim. Listen.
Why are we scheduling orders 5 years back? I'm still canceling orders from 2001.
Anything over a year old should cancel.
Should be canceled or scheduled?
Cancel, because they wouldn't let us do a mass purge. So it's just a matter of getting in there and canceling them ourselves.
The female voice goes on to say that a lot of those patients might have gotten treatment elsewhere or died or moved to another state. So the whistleblower complained to the inspector general, but says the IG just sent the complaint back to the VA hospital. So he sent a letter to Congress, and a few months later he was fired. He's now fighting that termination. Years later, the IG finally acknowledged that hospitals across the country did purge some of those requests, but still were treating those who needed it. And the whistleblower's contention is you cannot treat those who need it or know who needs it because their files have been destroyed. We tried to contact the VA several times today, Megan. They did not call us back.
Wow. All right, Trace, thank you. Joining me now with reaction, Pete Hegseth, a Fox News contributor and the CEO of Concerned Veterans for America. Pete, I don't understand whether they just got rid of some old x-rays that they decided weren't necessary, because the Office of Special Counsel seemed to say, look, we don't need to look into this any further, because basically what happened was every VA was told that they could do a mass purge of all outstanding imaging orders, like radiation orders. And that's basically what happened out in Los Angeles. Is that all this is?
Oh, and that's why they wouldn't comment on it, of course. Of course, there's some of that, right? They were so far backlogged. There were some cases that have been resolved. Okay, we're going to deal with that. But you know what? This isn't new news. I mean, we've known they've been fudging numbers. They've been fudging appointment dates for a long time. What this is should be alarming, whatever adjective you want to pick, damning new evidence that they're deleting. They are, and the Marine that stepped up and said, I will not be a part of this. I will call my IG office and call out this department, said, because I will not throw other vets under the bus to try to make my performance metrics look better. And he believes, in the interviews, he knows that there were legitimate appointments with veterans still waiting who were canceled to make performance metrics look better. It's all about bureaucratic CYA, and that's what you see in this particular
In the law,
instance.
you look for corroborating evidence. So, you know, this is on paper, so they say they did this to cover up the fact that there is a backlog. Well, what's the corroborating evidence? Do we have veterans who are out there complaining that they've had appointments and they can't get in to have those appointments, and there's a backlog and nobody ever calls them back? Do we have that? I think we do.
I think we do. Got an email this morning from a friend of mine whose buddy who he served with at that very Los Angeles facility had sent in a request, waited months, then years, never heard back at all, almost died because he didn't get the medical, didn't get the examination needed to identify what he was suffering from. And later on in that audio, they talk about dismissively just saying, well, some of them have died and some of them have had other appointments, so let's just delete them. They're not, this is something, they're not thinking of veterans as customers. They're thinking of them as numbers through a process rather than customers who need to be served one by one, because each one of these has a story. They've served on the battlefield of this country and deserve to be taken care of. And bureaucrats instead are covering their butts.
Let me play devil's advocate. What's the big deal? So you go to another hospital. The VA doesn't call you back. Go to another hospital.
You can't. You cannot go to another hospital. You don't have a choice, and that's something I think Washington should address. I think this facility would, if it had a competitor, a way that vets could go somewhere else to get this care, it might be accountable to provide better service. Also, those in charge of this hospital can't get fired because it's impossible to fire a senior executive service member, something we're also trying to address on the Hill. So there's no accountability, and there's no portability, and there's also no transparency. You ask for comment, they don't give it because they don't have to, and they hide behind their paperwork and their titles, and no one holds them accountable. So if a veteran could choose, that'd be a great option. Unfortunately, they cannot. If you're stuck, you're stuck.
I've said it many times. My mom devoted most of her career to helping vets at the Albany, New York Veterans Hospital. There are so many wonderful employees who just want to help the veterans.
Absolutely.
And yet there are others who want to cover up malfeasance or negligence, sadly. Pete, great to see you.
Thanks, Megan.